Hamilton County Commissioners meeting of November the 1st, our staff meeting. If we could please introduce ourselves, that would be great.
Christy Mitchell, clerk.
Leslie Hervey, Clerk to the Board.
Alicia Reese, Vice Chair of the Hamilton County Board of Commissioners.
Good afternoon. I'm County Commissioner Denise Driehaus.
Jeff Ludo, County Administrator.
Charlie Annis, Prosecutor's Office.
Thank you so much. Stephanie Summerall Dumas, President of the Hamilton County Board of County Commissioners. I am glad to be back. It's been a while. I was saying I missed 4 meetings, so 4 meetings out of 4 years, I don't think that's too bad. That's 1 a year. So, but thank you guys. I saw when I was feeling like looking at you guys, I listened and you guys were, as usual, taking care of business. I know Vice President Rishi hit that gavel. I thought she had broken. Bam! But thank you all for all that you do. We're going to move forward to our first agenda item, comprehensive update on COVID-19.
Well, good afternoon, Commissioners. Thanks for having me today. I will stick to my standard format this afternoon, and just generally speaking right now, we are seeing a slight increase in cases with COVID-19. Today we are at 110. For reference, about 2 weeks ago we were at 90, so it's ever so slight. We are also seeing, when you look at our sewer sheds, that data analysis is still occurring by the Ohio Department of Health, and we are seeing slight increases in several sewer sheds as well. So there is still COVID in our community, as we all know. Looking geographically across the county, you can see we still remain fairly light, the blue being between 0 and 10 cases, yellow being between 10 and 50 cases of COVID-19. This week's map, you can see there's a few less blue spots, and some of those are filling back in with yellow. So just a general reminder for the population out there, just continue to be careful, and most importantly, if you're sick, stay home. We don't need to see any respiratory viruses, whether it's the RSV virus that's in the news, COVID-19, or flu spreading within our community. As far as COVID-19, what is spreading? It is still the Omicron variant of COVID-19. There are several subvariants out there. They range from the BQ1, BQ11, and the BF7. Long way of saying that they're all Omicron. They're all fairly similar in symptomology to what we've seen over the last 6 months here in our community. One of the most important ways still to tell how much COVID is in our community is with hospitalizations. Those remain relatively flat. The statistical line that was put on this graph does show a slight upward trend, but nothing of great concern. In fact, compared to where we were at 2 weeks ago, we were a couple cases lower today. We have 122 individuals within the hospital, 15 individuals within the ICU, and 6 individuals on ventilators. Our team continues to do our vaccination efforts. We are out on Wesley Avenue in Norwood, right near the Board of Elections, and we see about 300 people per week at our sites. We are still providing homebound vaccinations, so if individuals are looking to get vaccinated but are unable to leave their home due to whatever reason, we are able to come to them anywhere within Hamilton County. And then shifting over to monkeypox, since we last met 2 weeks ago, in the state of Ohio, there have been 30 additional cases. However, in Hamilton County, only 1 additional case of monkeypox in the last 2 weeks, which continues to be good news. We are still running weekly clinics. The Cincinnati Health Department is also running clinics, so if somebody needs the vaccine for monkeypox, they are now eligible and are able to get that. And then the last slide I have for you today, it just shows the national trends for monkeypox continues to decline, a fairly nice sharp decline. So hopefully that continues throughout the U.S. and our region, and eventually we can move on to other infectious disease topics. With that, I conclude, but I would be happy to take any questions today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your report. I don't have any questions. I did contact the commissioner just for a couple questions I had when I was going through, and I really truly believe I was chosen as a sacrificial commissioner to actually go through it and be able to kind of say how it feels. I had a somewhat, I think, mild case. The residue of after I had some of the symptoms, I think, last a little longer. I would like to make a comment. Just for me, the free kits were not easy to find. So I want us to look at, as a county, making sure that everybody has access for those free kits and that we are dispersing them in a diverse way. I did, as I was looking for, because I wanted to take at least 3 tests, and as I looked for the free kits, I said, oh, okay, the libraries have free kits. And then when I looked into the libraries, they were only for drive-through libraries, which limits, it started from downtown out to the east, like Anderson and Covedale and all those sorts of things. But as you go west and into the inner city, I think Center for Health, the Closing the Health Gap has some kits, but Mount Healthy has none, Bond Hill, up where in Forest Park. So I don't know how the restriction of just drive-throughs. I know at one time there were curbside giving out kits, but we need to expand out into the west side, the inner city more with these free kits, and if it means people have to come out of the library with gloves or whatever to allow people to get them, that's what we need to look at. So I was just really surprised that we were not expanding out more, that not you, but the county. So we need to make sure as we give our 2 million, 3 million, that every area has the opportunity to get those free kits. So those were my only concerns and comments, but thank you, of course, for all that you do. Appreciate it. Vice President Reese.
Yes, thank you, Health Commissioner Kesterman, for the report. I think the point of your report today is COVID is still around. Certainly, Commission President Dumas is a witness that COVID is still out here. She was saying it every week, but it's true. And so it is important, the tools that we have, and if there are ways to make them more accessible, is great. I do think it's good that this board, we didn't abandon. When you look at Kentucky, you're on your own now. There's other counties where you just on your own. You're out here by yourself or feel like you're by yourself because it's not the front page of the news anymore. It's not the leading story. It's not breaking news, but it still is real. So I think that is very important. And then I always am going to say this every time you come, because I know you agree with me on this. We got to keep our eyes on COVID has also affected people who, they came out on the other side. They didn't die. They beat COVID, but lungs not the same. Some of the other things not the same. Different health ailments are not the same. And I know we put money in helping with the University UC Hospital to create a facility like that, but they said they're overbooked. I'd like to keep up on the numbers. If they're overbooked, that's a lot of people out here that are kind of on their own and need help. So I just wanted us to kind of keep that in front of us, what that number looks like. As we're going into a new budget, is there anything else we can and should be looking at for long-term health as it relates to the effects that impacted citizens?
Certainly. Yep, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Commissioner Dreehouse.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. Good to have you back.
Thank you.
I'm sorry that you had to suffer through COVID. So I have been listening to some national reports about what we might anticipate as we move into the colder weather. People go indoors for the holidays. So do you have any predictions or anything that we should be, not we personally, but rather the community should be doing, or any behaviors that you would recommend moving into the holidays?
So I generally have heard the same similar type report where we are looking at probably a more active respiratory illness season, whether it's COVID, whether it's flu, whether it's RSV. And I think in general, I just really want to continue to emphasize those basic things: cleaning, hand washing, covering your cough, and more importantly, keeping sick at home as we enter the holiday season. So if you have a big event, Thanksgiving's coming up, if you're thinking about going but you don't feel great, it's probably a time to make the decision not to go so that you're not exposing the rest of the family to anything that you might be having.
All right, so hopefully we won't have any major increases, and you're not seeing it in the numbers yet.
No major increases, but there's definitely a slight upward trend right now. It's ever so slight, but we are watching it closely.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And I guess the last thing I want to say is, because as Vice President Reese was saying, we were emphasizing about, all the things we need to do with our masks and all that. You're never too busy if it's time to get another booster, get it. I was so busy out in the community that I scheduled everything, but not that. So never be too busy to follow up on your vaccinations or your boosters. So that's what I want to say. And a lot of people say sometimes you have that, the brain fog. And so I just want to let everybody know who's listening, my mind is sharper than ever. So I wasn't impacted that way. I thank God for that. But anyway, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay, we will move forward. Item number 2, Convention District Update, 3CDC, Steve Leeper. Would you like to come forward? Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. How are you?
Great.
Glad you're feeling better.
Thank you.
Been through it myself.
Okay.
I'd like to give you a update on the Convention Center District. We've been making some progress, both on the front of the hotel itself and on the convention center, proposed convention center renovation. And I think for the most part, it's good news, although challenging interest rates and cost of construction are going to be something that we're going to have to look forward to in the future. But we're confident we're going to be able to work through these things. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit today about the district itself, the Convention Center Hotel, the restoration, and the opportunity we have to control the WEX garage property. I've talked to you a little bit before about this, but it's sort of good news and bad news. Bad news is that if you walk around our Convention Center district, it's not something that we should be overly proud of. It's quite frankly, it's a little bit embarrassing, the condition of the property around there. Surface parking lots, vacant buildings, and a convention center that certainly has seen better days, and it obviously needs a facelift. We also lack a first-class convention center hotel, and the rest of our stock of hotels, although we do have some solid properties that have come in recent years, our pool of hotels are probably not where it should be. Our lodging tax, I will tell you, is recovering, and that is very, very good news. It's recovering faster than we all think. We've been working closely with Jeff and his staff and the city and their staff to collect and monitor the receipts that are coming in, and it's not out of the question that our hotel tax receipts this year may match our highest year, which was 2019. And we would have never thought that. We were thinking when we first started to model this that we wouldn't be back till about 2024. Now, this is actuals through August, and we've got to see how we do in this the remainder of the third quarter and the fourth quarter. But so far, it is better than we initially thought. And it's not only weekend travel, but we're seeing daily occupancy increasing during the week, which is something that we haven't seen in a while. But we also have obligations with that tax, and we're going to talk a little bit about how we're going to address those obligations. And we have existing legislation and cooperation agreements that we need to work through if, in fact, we want to effectuate what we think is this new common plan of financing that we want to employ to undertake the redevelopment of the area. Just to remind everybody the matter of the district. So green is obviously the convention center. D is the Millennium site, which we are proposing to be the future expansion of the convention center to the extent that it's deemed by the community to expand. So we're leaving the opportunity to expand, but also in the interim, making that space available to the convention center so it can use it for programming and hopefully attracting shows to the area. And then A is the proposed site for the hotel. And then B and C could be both hospitality uses, parking, or additional mixed-use development. These are some photos of the site that you all well know of. Of course, the Millennium site is down, and that photo's a bit dated because now we have a pretty spectacular mural that's on the side of the 8451 building that will complement what we do when we renovate that space. So let's give you an update on the hotel development. And of course, I really want to make sure that we all understand that these things are kind of intertwined. Although some people may think that the hotel was a priority and some other people may think that the convention center is a priority, they really need each other. And it's been clear in our discussions with our proposed hotel developers that a investment in the convention center upgrade is critical to them and critical to their consideration of building what would be nearly a $500 million hotel on that site. So again, we envision that the green of the convention center would cross the street and go onto the Millennium site, and then the star is the location of the proposed hotel. We are still planning, based on the study that we did from Hospitality Evaluation Services, that we can build a 800-room hotel. That's still our goal, with a national affiliation and 60 to 80,000 square feet of meeting space, and then some additional ballrooms. So what we're doing there, quite frankly, if we are successful at getting this hotel, would eliminate or alleviate, rather, not eliminate, alleviate or mitigate the need to put anything new on an expansion to the extent we would consider an expansion. We could really focus on the exhibit space because we're picking up so much more meeting room and potential ballroom space. So we did issue a request for interest to national developers, a rather broad list. We got 4 RFP responses, and we felt like all of them were sufficient, that we would ask for all of them to actually submit a proposal. We received proposals on the 24th, and then we are now reviewing and assessing and analyzing those proposals, and the idea that we would bring all parties in for interviews. We have asked both the city and the county to participate in the interviews. Three members from each side would join us in the interview process. We also are asking members of Visit Cincy, the Port, the Chamber, and the African American Chamber, and the CBC if they would like to join us in that process, and I believe most folks will take us up on that. So we're set for an hour-and-a-half interviews for each one, with the idea that hopefully we can come with some consensus as a group to make recommendations to this body and to the city on narrowing it down to one firm that we would enter into then exclusive negotiations with, at which point in time we would work with all the parties involved to come up with an agreement that makes sense for all of us, and both the public getting what we need in terms of a new hotel that provides us the room blocks that we need and the support it needs for the convention center, but doing so in the most fiscally responsible manner that we possibly can. So we've got a task ahead of us, but I think we are ready for it. And the idea would be then, to the extent that we are successful in negotiating an agreement, that we would bring said agreement to this body again sometime in the first quarter of next year, along with the city, to hopefully come up with a financing and development plan that meets everybody's needs. We have 4 developers. I just want to summarize who they are. And by the way, these are each of these are renderings that they have submitted. I would not get too caught up that this is exactly what it will look like, but certainly get a sense of what we could have and allow us to dream a little bit. As you will see with the convention center, we want to dream big on this, but all of which I think have given some thought to design and how that design and that building may incorporate itself into the fabric of that district and, of course, the Central Business District itself. Portman is a group out of Atlanta. They've been around since the 50s. They started originally as a design firm, but morphed into a development firm in the 50s and 60s. They have built a lot of, they've been involved in a lot of development of the old traditional Central Business District of Atlanta. Of course, you know Atlanta, like a lot of southern cities, have sort of sprawled and expanded, and you've gotten, there's other sections of that uptown and Buckhead and other areas, but a lot of their focus have been historically in the Central Business District of Atlanta. In terms of comparable projects, they have the Hyatt Regency in Salt Lake City and the San Diego Lane Field. But they are certainly a very capable group, and you can see have developed over 19,000 hotel rooms across the country. Another group is Matthews Southwest out of Dallas. They were founded in 1993 by a gentleman of Jack Matthews. They have about 2,400 rooms that they've developed, 800 that are presently under construction as well. Some of the additional comparable projects are the west element of Convention Hotel in Philadelphia, and also the Omni Hotel in Dallas. I think a contingent of folks from this area went down with the chamber to visit Dallas. Dallas is pretty bold on their convention business. Not only did they build this hotel, but they are planning a multi-billion, billion with a B, redevelopment of their convention center, which would include the demolition and new construction of a new convention center. Inland Pacific really is a combination of the folks at a company called Inland Pacific, but they've also met up with the Lowe's flag and the Lowe's Hospitality Group. They were founded in 1973. They have 2,700 rooms that they've developed in the Kansas City Lowe's Convention Center, and they've been involved in the Columbus Hilton expansion, although like the Omni, those are publicly held assets that method is not something that we are pursuing, at least at this time. And then finally, the Newcrest Image Group. They are out of Texas as well. There's something about Texas and the hospitality industry. But they have been involved in the business for over 4 decades. They have developed 94 but managed 208, so they're both in the development management business. They recently sold a big portfolio of hotels that they developed, but they've subsequently purchased a new portfolio as well. They have been involved in the Los Angeles Westin Convention Hotel and the Embassy Suites in our fair city of Covington, so they have some local connection here as well. If I can stop here, Madam Commissioner, if you want me to stop here and just strictly talk to the hotel, or you want me to go through the balance as we get into the restoration of the convention center? It's at your choice.
It's up really to the board. If you
keep going.
would like.
Keep going?
Want him to keep going? Okay.
Okay.
All this stuff?
Yep, right notes.
So, the Duke Energy Convention Center. We have employed a group out of Columbus, Moody Nolan. It is a firm that's been around for about 40 years. Kurt Moody started the business. His son is Jonathan Moody, now runs it. We are working with them not only on this project, but they are also working with us on the Finley Community Center, and they are the prime architect in both areas, and they're on their own in the project in Finley. But they've teamed up with their friends at TVS, where they've worked together on the Nashville Convention Center, as also the restoration and expansion of the Javits Center in New York City. We've asked them to really work hard at making that convention center more attractive and functional, flexible as it needs to be, and green as it needs to be, because it's anything but that right now. So they're looking at, as you see, these 8 elements. I don't need to go through them, but they're pretty obvious when you think about what we need to do to that convention center. These are a series of renderings that we're trying to give you a perspective. So this would be as if you were coming off of 75 at 5th Street, looking westward. And this is the pretty radical change that we're looking for, which is a complete change in the facade and glass and opening up of the convention center, and then a change in the roof line as well. This is what would be across from the hotel site. This is looking down from Fountain Square. This is a clear advantage that we have from other cities, that our proximity of our convention center is so close to the center of our city. So conventioneers really don't have far to go to see some of the nightlife and action, food and beverage options that we have. This is something that we really wanted to work at, which is to give ourselves some sort of more positive and enticing entrance to the convention center. I wouldn't get too tied up on that canopy. We're not kind of crazy about that design, and plus I imagine it's a lot of money. So this is the interior of the, as you walk in there and you see that sort of spaghetti view of the vertical transportation. It takes you up to a mezzanine level that really did nothing but accept the bridge from the Millennium, so it's really not much function to that vertical transportation. So we're recommending to open it up and then centralize it to the middle of the building. This will give you a better sense. Again, this is running along Fifth Street. This is the Millennium site, so we really believe that it can be incorporated into the convention center. There's a lot of facilities across the country. The two that come to mind are Boston and San Diego. Boston, whose weather is more difficult than ours. Ours is not quite as good as San Diego's, but very good. And we would use it to program both things that go on at the convention center, but we could use it as a civic space as well. So this is Elm Street as it splits the convention center from the Millennium site. And this is what we're proposing, that Elm Street would be closed, although it could be opened periodically on an as-needed basis. This is the interior of the convention center. So this is the hallway that runs up Elm Street right now. It really is a dead end. It doesn't go to anywhere. What we're recommending is actually that we take the exhibit space all the way to the exterior of the building, and it would pick us up about 12,000 square feet, not a lot, but then you can see that with the opening up of that eastern section of the convention center, it provides the opportunity to program both interior and exterior of the building. This is looking south. And then, of course, one of the other items that we've thought about, which you would look to many of our other convention centers and competitors, is to be able to have exterior space that you can access from the interior of the building that we could use to do events up in that space. And we're recommending a rather significant rooftop civic space. And this gives you a view heading east towards the Millennium site. And then that, we would go through and really restore everything from the bathrooms to the kitchen to the junior ballroom to the meeting rooms as well. So, how would we like to undertake this? We have a series of, part of our challenge here is that this tax is 10.5%. It's split up between the city, the county, the CVB, and then a chunk that goes to the operations and upkeep of the convention center. What we'd like to do is really begin to look at that existing debt. We have put a budget in of $200 million for this effort, and we would like to consider as part of the plan that we would refinance some of the existing debt, maybe reallocate some of the existing revenue that comes in. Hopefully it continues to grow as we see it, and then we would pursue other revenue and capital sources, some of which would be maybe made available at the state level. As you well know, the city has approved $7 million as part of their rollover, and that happened 2 weeks ago or so, where they proposed to provide $7 million in critical pre-development funding that allows us to continue to move this process along and keep the design moving. We will take the design and spend another $250,000 with Moody to get the design in a more defined way and with more specificity, and we intend to employ 3 separate cost estimators that would come together independently. They would do their cost estimation and then come together and reconcile it, so we'll get a sense as to whether or not we can take that cartoon that we have and pay for it within the budget that we've set. And then beginning January to June, we would move quickly on design. We would recommend hiring a construction manager at that time. We would probably work with the same team of folks, or at least the city and the county, on the selection process for that construction manager. And then we would continue to work on a financing plan, obviously to get final approval from the city and the county and the CVB, who would have some involvement in this as well. And with the idea that it's not out of the realm of possibilities that we could start construction in the third quarter of 2023. And then finally, the Wex Garage. We think this property is critical to the overall success of the redevelopment of the site. Right now, it is not in great condition. We do have a purchase contract for the site. We will probably operate it in an interim basis until we figure out what we're going to do with it, whether it's going to be restored and then made part and made available for the Convention Center Hotel and Convention Center, or whether or not it would be demolished, and we would use the land to reconfigure either how the hotel is laid out on the site or additional mixed-use development. Right now, I think there's an interest to use that garage again, and that the developers may not have to build parking, which would be a huge savings to all involved. But we will decide eventually what we want to do, but when you take it in conjunction with a site at the old Convention Center Mall that would hopefully be demolished here in the near future, we think it can be attractive for either hospitality uses or mixed-use development. I know we've set up a selection committee. I know we've been interacting with the staff, and we're going to begin to have, I think, regular meetings between the city-county staffs going forward. But we also want to do what we can to listen to you and get your input. So we will make ourselves available at any time to meet with you individually or as a group to see if you have some thoughts either on the convention center or hotel. We welcome it. Not only do we welcome it, but we would appreciate any thoughts that you may have or ideas that you may have, and we would do our best to try to think through and assess those ideas and comments and incorporate them into the project. So please make sure that that I am always available to you, and my colleagues are as well, to make sure that we're serving you in the best manner possible. And I think that's it, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you so much for your presentation. I just had really a general question. As we put all this together, the convention center, the headquarter hotel, the wax garage, the rooftop, my question is, and you don't have to answer this now, we're always looking at how can we save money. You know, we're talking about 200 million, and so I would like to see an estimate of if we don't do the rooftop, how much. I'm sure that's probably a small percentage of the total amount. If we don't renovate the wax garage, so I'd like to see an option of doing some. I know you had said that the convention center and the hotel needs to be done simultaneously, but I'd like to see if we decided as a board we would do this part, like Fort Washington Way is going to have that rooftop stuff, and you're talking about rooftop for this, and so without doing some of those components, what would the cost look like?
Yeah, that's the way we approach this. So we'll ask for bid alternatives so that when we get cost estimations, we will ask them cost estimates of if we took this out or took that out or kept this in, or so that people can make decisions about it, and we can be pretty clear and open about the next time we get here is that, well, what are we paying for that, or should we do that, or do we have another source of revenue? This is nice, but can we get some other revenue source to pay for that? So yeah, we can do those bid alternates and pricing alternates so that we can make a decision, because that's how you do these things. Because given where interest rates are, given where cost of, I don't know where this is going to go. And on the other hand, we do want to dream big, and then we can always retreat if we don't think that it's matching up to our budget.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I appreciate it. Vice President Reese.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. And as someone who comes from this industry, so I'll get really deep into the mechanics. I want to first of all say that there are a lot of things that's brought to this county big. Everybody. I mean, we got the Bengal Stadium. They said they got a bold idea. We've got Washington Way. They said they got a bold idea. And all of these bold things cost a lot of money. So I appreciate you saying it's going to cost the dollars. Where we have to be is looking at what things, based on the taxpayers, because the question is, who's paying for all of this, is what I'm hearing from a lot of people. And it can't be just all this on top of the taxpayers at the same time. So we have to pick and choose and get the best bang for our dollars. I'm going to go on record. I am one that believes that this should be a phased-in approach. I believe that the number one thing needed is the hotel. I believe that if we got a hotel right now, and as someone who actually has booked conventions, very big ones, that there will be conventions right now that will be able to go into the existing convention center right now if we had the hotel room nights. We're in a battle right now with one that I'm aware of with Cleveland. So if we had that, we could start making money and then go to phase 2. I am concerned, and this is nothing personal, but I am concerned about a monopoly in downtown Cincinnati. We seem to have maybe 3 entities that will own everything, and all of us will be different personalities. We'll go on with our lives, but these things will be around for 50 years. And it may not be people like yourself and us that's willing to work together. It may be an unelected body that will control all of the property of downtown. You won't need elected officials because the unelected people will own everything, and it would be a monopoly. So I am concerned about a monopoly. I like to mix it up and have different people own the property so that we could have, that's what America's about, more diversity. So I am concerned about the monopoly of an unelected body that the public cannot have any engagement with. They can't vote them out. They can't, if they don't like what they're doing, they can't do anything about it, but they got to pay for it. And from what I'm hearing, a lot of people in the public don't want those kinds of deals. I did see, and I appreciate you saying that you're willing to hear our thoughts, because I brought it up to Jeff Aludo, our administrator, that I think that I don't want to read about in the newspaper, here's what it is, take it or leave it. Do you like it or not? It's in the Business Courier about Wick's garage today. It was in the Enquirer and the news that we saw the first drawings. And if I had a chance to talk privately, I'd have told you I don't like it. I don't think the drawing is futuristic. I don't think it takes us, as I look at other cities that I've been a part of, I don't think it makes us futuristic. I don't think the drawing takes us to 20 years from now. But I could have said that, and maybe if someone had met with us about, hey, here's some drawings, we're looking at it, what do you think? It can't be, everybody comes to us when it's time to pay, but nobody comes to us when it's time to have any interaction. I know it's tough because we can't privately meet, but we've had issues where, Jeff, and I would put this out, where you set up meetings where you said people needed to meet with us, and he set the meetings up. So I hope going forward, I don't read about or look at in the newspaper and say, well, this is it, take it or leave it, you guys pay for it. The funding model is what I wanted to ask you a question about about the funding model of the $200 million. I understand the city's put in 7, it leaves us with about $193 million gap. But you go in and says you want to enter in a common plan of financing which creates no distinction between the city and the county's money, that tax dollars that goes into the CFA in terms of distributions. Can you further elaborate on that? Because we have people outside of Cincinnati who you don't have to interact with, but we represents us in Sharonville and some other areas. That money goes to pay off their debts for their convention centers and their expansions too.
Yeah, I'm well aware of that. Let me answer a couple different questions.
Okay.
First of all, just to be clear, we own very little property in downtown Cincinnati. 3CDC owns very little property. It owns 1 building, maybe the new Foundry building, and we own the space around Boca and Soto. So we own very little property. Secondly, we're not telling you to take it or leave those renderings. We're showing you this is very preliminary stage. You can pass the feedback and you can be clear about what you don't like about it. But we certainly are not telling you to take it or leave it. I want to be clear that we're not asking you to take it or leave it. We would never do that. And we are such in the early stages, and a lot of this will be flushed out when we do this costing model and what can stay, what can leave, and what do we need to add to it. In terms of the $197 million, what I mean by a common plan of financing is right now there's debt that's only common on the convention center itself. So both the city and the county both agree in a cooperation agreement on how that debt service is paid annually. There's about $50 million left on that. There is other debt that then the county has entered into to support both the folks up in Sharonville in their convention center, and they've also worked with the port to acquire the Millennium site and prep that site so we can have that as part of the district. So they took the proactive steps to go ahead and do that. That is also a series of debt. That's maybe $53, $54 million outstanding. All of that debt, with the exception of Sharonville, we are envisioning that we would refinance. By the way, the city also incurred some debt on behalf, with the TOT money for the infrastructure for FC Stadium. So all of the debt we're suggesting that either the city has incurred or the county has incurred, we would refinance and extend as part of the plan. The Sharonville debt would stay outstanding, and it would be in a good priority position, and those, both the city of Sharonville would be protected, and so would the bondholders. So we've really studied all of these outstanding bond issues and those individual indentures that cover those bond issues, and we feel that we can come up with a plan that goes forward that would not only generate enough money to refinance that debt, but also put us in a position to raise the $200 million in proceeds. Now, we've got a lot of work to do yet on how we can do that. It's going to require approval from a lot of different bodies, including the CVB and others who are presently the beneficiaries of some of this TOT. But ideally, we would like to give this some thought about how we would approach it and bring that plan back to you for some consideration, not take it or leave it, but for some consideration, and we will like to brief you individually before we bring it out publicly. And then we hope to be able to do that either later this year or very early part of 2023.
Okay. Yeah, I have some issues. I have lots of questions about that funding model because we assume that 20 years from now, Sharonville, or 10 years from now, they don't want to do something, or not just Sharonville. There may be some other tourism attractions in other places. I have concerns that, and I was part of helping put the CFA together, but one of the top weekends that we overcharge in the hotels is the music festival with a predominantly African-American consumer base. But when you look at the CFA, not one dime goes back into anything in the black community. So we want to have the flexibility that, say, our Cincinnati Black Music Walk of Fame, or if there's something out in the county that we want to do, that we would have those abilities to do it. If you put it in one, if I'm at the city, my only concern would be what's downtown at the city or what's in one of the 50 plus neighborhoods. Ours goes beyond that. If we want to do something bigger, one of the things, maybe a sports complex, we won't have the ability for these tourism dollars to go beyond. We would be tied up with the city and the county equally as one versus us having the opportunity to make sure that the county is outside of the city areas, would have those opportunities. So I just wanted to put that as we're looking at the finalization of a funding model, I want to put that there. And I think taking away our vote or their vote, and that if I'm the city, I wouldn't want to have all my money going to outside of the city of Cincinnati. But we represent 49 municipalities, and there may be some other things. Blue Ash may want to do something that would qualify for these dollars. So I just want to make sure we're not doing something that strangleholds us, handcuffs us from future things beyond just City of Cincinnati Convention Center. So
We are contemplating in this model that there would be, like it is now, that there's a waterfall. In other words, the debt gets paid, and then there's residual proceeds that come out of the bottom, and that's how generally this body has spent that money to accommodate some of the things you described. And we are contemplating that, and we recognize that, and it's done now in the agreement, that there will be an agreement between the city and the county and the CVB as to how that residual gets spent, and that would be established up front, and it will be codified up front, so there's just no misunderstanding that the various parties would be able to be the beneficiary, the various jurisdictions would be able to be the beneficiary of that waterfall. So I understand the issue.
okay. Yeah, thank you. I just want to make sure Jeff and our lawyers make sure. I don't want to have loopholes.
Yeah, Madam President, Madam Vice President, yes, so as Mr. Leeper said, that's been part of the discussions that we've had with them to this point. And again, the discussions we've had on the financing plan have been very high level at this point. It's very preliminary, but that was one of the tenets that we had talked about, was at the end of the day, the county's differing priorities of the county and the need for some residual at the bottom of the waterfall to affect those. I think 3CDC has taken those comments as we've provided them, and I would just say, in deference to 3CDC, that what we were asking of them in terms of coming up with this financing model for convention center and the convention district is going to be challenging enough. So, that's why we wanted to make sure that up front we had indicated that, but look, as we put this together, we know things are going to be tight. We know this is not going to be easy, but reservation of some level of residual for the county to look at other priorities, as you said, Madam Vice President, would be paramount to the county.
Gotcha. And then I would like, Minister Ludo, I'd like to see if we did everything. It's just like, this to me looks like if this is a, Rolls Royce. I mean, look, oh man, let me have everything. But then you get there and you find out you can't afford a Rolls Royce. You need to go over here to the Ford area and we can put some wheels on it. We can make it look nice and you can be just as nice, but you can be within your budget. I would like to see on ours, if we phased it in, what would that look like? If we did everything, obviously, what you're saying, everything at the same time here. And then if we phased it in, what would that look like? So that we can make an intelligent understanding based on the money that we do have. So I wanted to ask you that. I wanted to make sure that that is presented to us so that we have a full, not an all or nothing. You don't walk out and say, well, you can't get the Rolls Royce, you ain't gonna be able to drive. We got something you can drive, but it might not be the Rolls Royce. The other thing I wanted to ask you, what's happening, or had you looked at the Hyatt and Saks? Saks is leaving, we got the Hyatt, city owns some portion of it. I know we didn't have that originally when we were looking at the hotel headquarters, but is that, or did you look at that, or?
Sure did.
Okay, and what came out of
The
it?
city has rights under their agreement with Saks to purchase that property, at market value. We are working very closely with the city on that, and the city has indicated to Saks Fifth Avenue that they intend to exercise their rights to acquire that property. You should know that the property is not, it is strategically located, so we ought to, I think that's what you're getting at, is it is strategically located. The challenge is that it has its restrictions in that on top of it is the ballroom for the Hyatt. So literally on the roof of what would be the third floor, I guess. I know Commissioner Treehouse is a very strong customer of Saks Fifth Avenue. That there's the ballroom that restricts probably either demolishing building on top of it. We can look at what we could build on there, but the idea would be to gain, like the Wex Garage, we would like to gain control of it, but we are not using the proceeds of that. That is not in this financing. We're not contemplating having to use money from this plan to buy that property. We would do that outside it, and we would work and try to bring some private resources to support the city to get control of that site and think about it in the context of this redevelopment.
Yeah, I was just thinking, why are we reinventing the wheel? And could we save some money and do it there? If we're gonna be buying these things up, and I've been talking to Jeff about this, we gotta look at stuff more holistically. We've been looking kind of silos. I'm not talking about you in terms of, as our county, we've been looking at things because it comes to us and we're trying to,
Yeah.
and this board has been about how do we look at everything? Because just like now, you said you're trying to get the Wex Garage. Well, can those garage funds, now I know you said the port will own it, and usually when the port owns something, they don't have to pay property taxes. So I understand what you said. We own very little. I got that on paper. But I also know the port owns things and they run it where they ain't got to pay property taxes, but then it's still, so I'm looking at,
By the way, for the record, we pay a lot of
Yeah, I
property
know,
taxes.
you have to, that's why you don't own
A
it. But
lot.
that's why you say you don't own anything, you control it, but you ain't own it.
No,
I'm just-
if we control it, we pay property taxes. Let me be clear about that.
But let me say on this Wex Garage, you said that the port would own it. Is
I
according to
think
your
ideally,
paperwork.
I mean, we haven't finalized that. We've had some initial discussions about them owning it.
Can those revenues, because there's a lot of parking lots getting bought, parking garages, can any of those revenues go toward this, or does that have to be separate?
Well, the idea is that some of those revenues would be supportive to help us buy and restore that garage. Probably, they're insufficient right now because everybody's still recovering, and so where that garage is doing half of the revenues it was doing at its peak right now. I can just tell you that, half of what it was doing, its peak of being about 2018 or 2019, it's doing half of those revenues now. But you are correct, in all these instances, in that garage instance, that revenue would be pledged to the operations of that garage and to the renovation of that garage if it was deemed that was what we want to do. And therefore, it is adding because of when we don't have to build parking for the hotel, which means our costs will come down dramatically. And that's been our goal, is not to build infrastructure that we don't need. And this allows us to, so we are trying to think holistically on this front.
Now, this garage, is that different than the other? I thought you had one next to Convention Center.
You mean behind it?
Yeah, behind it.
Those are two garages that are owned by the port. This one's this is on Fifth Street.
I don't know why some of those revenues can't go toward this.
Because in their particular instance, I know this because I know about it, they borrowed significant amount of money to acquire those. And so the revenues from those garage pays that debt.
Now, we got a debt of $39 million plus for the Millennium, and right now it's just grass. And someone was telling me that they're looking to have some activities there, and I was a little, felt like, well, wait a minute, what's going over there? Because we need to be making money off of that, not just a green space. Is that something, you have something planned for there?
That's what, in the plan, let me just.
I mean now, I'm talking about now,
No,
not later.
No, we are not. That's owned by the port, and right now, apparently, there's some safety concerns about allowing people on that site. So ideally, we would get moving on this. When I said we want to move on the third quarter of next year, we would like to move third quarter of next year. This construction would start with this space. So we would build the outside first, and then to the extent that we decide in the future that we want to expand on the convention center, and we would expand the exhibit space, and that's typically what you want to do when you want to expand it. The way we're designing this is that we would have very little costs that we've incurred now that would be lost in an expansion. We would expand north.
Yeah. So that's the Millennium right now? That over there?
Right here.
Okay, and you're proposing this outdoor park?
We're closing the 6th Street, or excuse me, closing Elm Street. And that this is the exhibit space, and that in the future, it could come here and across. And the way we're designing this is that the lobby and that can all just stay the same. We already are building the meeting rooms, and so our only cost going forward would be the exhibit space, and that's where they typically measure, convention centers in terms of their size and competitiveness.
Oh, I got you. Yeah, my thought is when you go to Millennium, we got some trees and outdoor space, but we were getting property tax off that property. So now we put something on there, we're not making any money.
Correct. But you're making,
That's an issue for me.
hotel tax.
Well, I
mean,
mean, they're not coming here for the park and the outdoor space. We got Fountain Square one block over. So that's what I'm concerned about. We spent $39 million, and we told the people that, and I wasn't here, but we told the people they were going to get something, a hotel. Now we got $39 million worth of debt. We haven't paid it. We're going to refinance that. And then we coming back with some trees and some outdoor space to have some outdoor music. And, I mean,
But every time you do events, you're making money two different ways. You're making money on hotel tax, you're making money on sales tax. And the idea that to make us competitive and to even get the hotel developer renovating and improving that district is going to be kind of critical to us. Because right now, the status quo is where we're losing money.
well, we're losing money because we don't have a hotel.
Well, but a hotel.
I'll give you 5 conventions right now that's ready to sign if we got a hotel.
But a hotel's not coming if they don't think that the
No, I got
community's
that.
ready to renovate this.
Well, I mean, but this out here is not, I would challenge you to go back and think and you got the best people, figure out something that can go there that can make money for, we can go back to the taxpayers and say we're making money, not trickle down sales tax. We can get that now. You got, I mean, you do an excellent job at Fountain Square. You got the trucks come up, you got concerts, you go get sponsors. We don't need that down here. We
Let's
need
do,
some
I want to
extra
duly
money.
note that the commissioner said that I did an excellent job at something.
do.
here.
I
If we
give-
could-
I'll give you
If we
credit
could
where
put that on, if we
Yeah,
can
wait-
record that.
Yeah, wait a minute. I give you credit. I helped create you. I give you credit what you
So
do. I voted green.
I would not dismiss, and I think it would be good for you to see some of the other convention centers across the country where this space is used to attract shows. And that I would not dismiss the positive element that this is. In fact, if we've talked to everybody, including outside consultants, they've looked at it and said, do not underestimate this. And another matter on the Millennium. First of all, if it wasn't, and look, I realize it is a lot of money. I don't want to dismiss what you're saying about the Millennium. On the other hand, if that Millennium was still in the marketplace, our ability to attract a new hotel would be very difficult because it depresses the market. And if what we did was we got that asset out of the marketplace, and now to be honest with you, our average daily rate today is higher than what it was in our best year of 2019 for hotels. It's higher today than it was in 2019, and primarily because we've taken a whole portfolio of hotel rooms that were depressing the market out of the market. And our overall supply and quality of our overall supply is much better. So I realize that it's tough to sometimes see the benefit of it, but there's real benefit in getting that portfolio. And now we need to address it, get that debt restructured and taken care of so that it's not the burden on the county on itself and the hotel tax and the port and try to solve all these challenges that we have. But we have a lot going for us. I think the glass is half full here. I think the market is improving. I wish interest rates and costs were a little different, but we'll see how that goes next year. I'm confident that things are going to get better. And I welcome these sort of challenges back to us because, we don't have all the answers. And this is a process, a project that needs to have a process and needs to change as we get input.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. I just would hope you would take back. This is something, you say you want feedback. I'd like to take that back and see what we can do more that can make money. We got to take this to the taxpayers.
We got to make.
And I want to make sure, no, I'm just saying, that you want to challenge me. I'm like, if it was me, I would say, well, let me take it back. Let me bring you what they've sent us. I appreciate you mentioned Dallas. I mean, Dallas, the city of Dallas is 1.5 million people. You got a Jerry Jones that's got a net worth of $15.8 billion. So, I just think that for what I'm hearing, what I've heard from my expertise, from people that I had to go out and get voted for, they want to know, what are we doing over there that could make some money? And I have to be able to answer them confidently. And I can't say, oh, we're going to get some sales tax, because they taxes keep going up in their minds. We're paying for everything, and we're not getting
Under this
anything back.
proposal, the idea is that
That's all
this
I'm
is,
asking.
hotel tax is the primary source of financing, which is a tax that's generally not paid by people here in the region, although from time to time, folks in the region stay in the hotels, but primarily, it's from an outside source, and that's what we're trying to focus on,
No,
at least at this
and I
time.
get that, but a lot of people that's coming from out of town that don't, they're not, people that look like me, they not getting anything back, and they paying the highest, that's the highest weekend that they pay, and not one dime is going back to them. So if we're gonna do it, I'm just saying, there's other things. We got other things that we have to also consider, and I want to make sure we won't be able to do this type of thing for about 30, 40 more years. So I just want to make sure we've looked at every single thing.
I understand.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Dreehouse.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, and thanks for the presentation. So what I like about this approach is that it is broad, it is not piecemeal, it is in conjunction with the CVB and the city, It is in conjunction with experts. We've brought in some really good hoteliers to bid on something in the city. So I think this is all good news. I like the idea of getting control, of whether it's the port, the city, the county. I don't care. They're all partners. We're all partners. And getting control of all this property so we can create a district here that we can think about and do it's already done in phases. We're not doing it all at once. We couldn't possibly because it's too expensive. But look at it at one time and say, what is the vision for this district with the county, the city, the CVB, and everyone with an interest here, a financial interest in particular, having some say and some input on what this is all going to look like. So I am excited about what you've put in front of us. I, for one, think the convention center is very tired and outdated and not the best foot forward for the city of Cincinnati and Hamilton County. It's just not. And so I think that having the Millennium now down and a possible expansion in the future gives us some opportunity now with the convention center, redesign, and the hotel to the south. So I see a glass half full, as you say. So more particularly to the design of the convention center, I am hopeful that it will look fresh, new, and incorporate a lot of what we know post-COVID by way of technology and different ways that people meet at conventions and I'm sure you're thinking through all of this, have all of those kinds of things incorporated into the new facility so we are on the cutting edge and responding to what we have learned through COVID, through post-COVID, and how people are doing things differently now. And that all would be incorporated, including the outside space. Yeah. Because that outside space, now people want to meet outside when they can. I've been at a convention in Colorado, and so much of it was done outside because that's where people want to meet now. And so I am optimistic about that space that is now cleared where the Millennium was, and programming that as part of what happens at the convention center as part of a convention. And I don't mean to sound disagreeable, but I'm going to disagree on building I don't want to build anything on that space because we would have to tear it down if we were to have the money to do the expansion of the exhibit space. So, the expectation is that eventually that'll be exhibit space, but in the meantime, we can use it as this really cool outdoor space for the conventions that come to the county at the convention center. So I'm fired up about that space. I do want to recognize a couple of things. As we talk about the financing, and that's really what I think this is all going to come down to, is can we afford to do what we have, laid out, what you have laid out in front of us, and as far as the different, if we're tackling convention center and the green space and the hotel kind of first, what does that all look like? In the past, the county has only used TOT for the financing of any of what we've done in that district. So any renovation along with the city or maintenance of the convention center, the debt service that we owe down there, the Millennium, anything associated with the Millennium has all been paid through the TOT. And so I like that the county has done that. Some of that was before my time, some of that is since I've been here. But I think it is appropriate for us to use the hotel motel tax. It's a user tax for people that stay in hotels and motels in Hamilton County, and this is such a direct association with that I think it's appropriate that we continue to look at that as a financing vehicle for the county for our part as we talk about a financial stack and what the county's participation is. We've already participated in a big way related to the Millennium and took that on, but I think I would hope that we would look at our participation moving forward through the hotel motel tax. And as you say, do some kind of collective where we've got common debt and then we use what we know we have, especially since it's recovering, to help pay that off. So I just want to put that out there. As you talk about the $200 million for the project that you've put in front of us, I don't know if you have the answer to this, but I'm curious to know if this is $200 million, and the expansion of the exhibit space is on the horizon, has anybody done any cost estimates of what that expansion of the exhibit space would be and how much that would cost in addition to what we've got in front of us today?
We have some ballparks of that number. It only gets us, I can't remember the exact number, rather than me spit a number out here, but what I can do as part of this exercise is model a expansion onto the Millennium site that would include the exhibit space. So what would that exhibit space look like on that site? And then we could put a cost estimate. What you do is generally just put a square foot cost estimate to that. And that's relatively an easy thing to do. And as part of this cost estimation of the renovation, we could do that and come back to you and give you just a sense like, what would it cost to do this, and how much would the tot have to grow in the future? And based on your projections of where the tot's going, is this something that's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the line? I think that is a pretty relatively easy exercise to undertake, and be happy to do so.
Yeah, so I think it would help us, or it would help me at least, put this all in perspective, because in the end, we are trying to draw more conventions and conventioneers into this area so that we do better by way of economic development related to that industry. We know that an expanded exhibit space is part of the equation. We just can't afford to do it right now, And so we're doing what we can do, pieces we know need to be in place in order to make all this work, but I would like to know what the cost of that piece is, just so I can roll that around in my mind. Sure. And I would say, too, that while the hotel motel tax obviously is a source of payment for something like that, and I know you're thinking through this, what would be a state contribution towards that? What would be a private dollar contribution towards that? Because this community, when we did an exercise here, it's been years ago, I think when I first got here, we went out to the community and said, of these really kind of what I call big box things, but really big projects, where are your priorities? And this one was a very high priority. We just don't have the money to do that expansion of the exhibit space right now. And beyond that, we had to take the hotel down. So we're getting there. But I want, it would help me to understand timeframes and different funding sources if we knew what the whole bowl of wax was as we start to pick off pieces of it, as we go. And that's kind of what I feel like we're doing now. I think it's important to do it, but I'd love to see all of it together, including that expansion of the exhibit space. One other thing, as we've talked about doing this in conjunction with the city and making sure that we're all in the loop when it comes to the information that you have provided to us, and hearing what city electeds are thinking versus what county electeds are thinking or thinking together. I want to suggest that maybe we do some joint meetings as opposed to you're coming here, you're going there. There are timing differences there, and so I wonder if it might be helpful because you have committed to us and to them to do updates on a regular basis. I wonder if we could have quarterly meetings, or I don't know what the frequency would be. I think quarterly might do it, but have joint meetings of the city and the county. So like, Memorial Hall, or maybe at a convention center, maybe put it on the site and say, okay, we're here on the site. Let's have a joint meeting with the city. And we hear the same information at the same time, but there's an added benefit to us hearing what their questions are and them hearing what our questions are. And I think that might help facilitate this. I hate this like kind of phone call stuff where, it's what I went to the city and I heard this, I went to the county and I heard, it might be easier if we all heard the same thing at the same time and then got to respond at the same time. So, Madam President, I just want to throw that out there as maybe an opportunity in the future so that we can move. I think it might even expedite things a little bit if we could do it in that way. So I just want to offer that as a suggestion. So thanks again for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And I think that joint meeting is what I talked to Jeff earlier about, 3 representatives from the county and 3 from the city to meet on a regular basis to do an update. But at the same time, I would imagine we can invite anybody from the public that would like to maybe sit in during that discussion. So we're already planning that joint meeting.
Well, I think maybe different same church, different pews. I think we're talking about, in the 3-city, 3-county, we're talking about the review selection process on the hotel. I think what Commissioner Dreehouse was talking about was actually joint meetings of the
this
Board of
meeting.
Commissioners and City Council. So I'll leave that to.
Let me clarify, if you don't mind. So the presentation that Mr. Leeper gives, he's doing the same thing at the city and the county. What I'm suggesting is we have all the elected officials in the same room at the same time, in addition to what you were talking about, which is related to the hotel choice.
And that ongoing, the two staffs, on just in general,
Yeah.
we're going to have city-county staff meetings on this as well. So, but I think that's a great idea, and
Yeah,
I think
mean,
it would
we
make
certainly can
sense.
do that. We have to know what page we're on in that process, and I don't think we're there yet, but those joint meetings will help us to get to that level, for sure.
I understand.
Just a couple comments I had.
Yep.
I asked a general question because being on the executive board of the Cincinnati Visitors Bureau, I've heard a lot of this already. So I really want the public to know that I'm very concerned. I have other questions. When we talk about $200 million, that's at least $200 million, in my opinion, that it will most likely go up as we look at all sorts of variables within our environment and materials and all that stuff. But so that 200 million is something I think to start with. And also I wanted to talk about, when we talk about expansion, the numbers that Commissioner Dreehouse was talking about, we already have those, because I remember seeing those when we had a discussion. But, so it shouldn't take long to get what those numbers look like. And
Absolutely.
maybe we can have you come maybe in the next couple weeks, because I know they already exist, because I asked that same question, so. Okay, I don't have anything, yeah.
I just want to add, as we're looking at talking about a joint meeting, and I'm not speaking for everybody, but I know the kind of person I am. I'm not looking to sit in here and just get the PowerPoint. I mean, this is something, I say that the same with the Bengal Stadium. We start going to stadiums, I think that we should be getting out, going to these places, walking these other stadiums, talking to other people. And I feel the same way about this convention district. We've got some finalists or people who at least, not finalists, but people who have brought in proposals. I'd like to get out there. Jeff, our commission, we can go out and we go look at their work as well. I don't want anyone, a taxpayer, to come up to me and say, well, have you seen it? No, I ain't seen it. They gave it to me on a PowerPoint. I want to go out here and look at their work. So I would like to ask the administration to put that on, and all commissioners, I'm not telling you guys what to do, but that's what I want to see us do more of. I want to go see it for myself. I want to go touch it. I want to look at it. I know that the chamber has their trips, and that's good, and I think they do a great job. But we got to get elected, and we got to vote on stuff, and we can't just be the PowerPoint rubber stamps. I want to go out here and see, once we get, I guess, the finalists maybe, to see what they're looking at, what we're looking for, to see the comparison. So I want to expand it beyond the joint meeting to having some joint field trips, if you will, where we could go out and see some of the things that, and Mr. Leeper can take us out and show us, these are the things that we're looking at and looking toward. We can ask questions. We might even can meet with some of their administration. How did they finance it? What did they do? Have those kind of conversations. So I wanted to put that out. I know I had mentioned it to Jeff, but I think it would be good for us. I know all three of us we're out and about type of people. But I think that would be a good move for us to have before we're making final decisions.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you so much for coming. I
Thank you for
appreciate
having
it.
me. Appreciate it.
So if you could look at your schedule, Steve, and see when you can possibly come back with those numbers that we were talking about.
You mean to talk a little bit about what expansion would look like?
Sure. uh-huh.
Okay, I'll work with Jeff on that.
Just an email would suffice if that's all right with everybody else.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, no.
If you just want to get it to us via email, I don't know if we need a whole nother presentation, but I'm just curious to know what that one number is related to the expansion.
Whatever you want me to do.
I'd like to see you again. 'Cause
Let's make that for the record as well.
I don't mean to offend anybody, but,
Thank you.
Okay, see you
All right,
later.
I'll get this together.
All right, thanks. Okay, we'll move forward. Item number 3, 2023 PTR recommendation, our County Administrator Jeff Aludo.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm going to get the clicker here. On this item, as the board knows, every year the administration provides the board with a recommendation on a property tax rebate for the subsequent year. This recommendation usually comes right around this point of time in the year to both provide the auditor's office with the time to certify the level to the property tax duplicate, but also to make sure that enough of the year has elapsed so that the health of the fund from which the property tax rebate is provided is better understood. So I'm going to provide a little bit of history on this and then a recommendation, and happy to take any questions today. At the same time, schedule this for another staff meeting for deliberation as well, meet individually with board offices to answer questions as well before the board ultimately takes action on this. So first of all, for the public who may be watching, what is the PTR? And the PTR is short for property tax rebate. Historically, this was established as an element of the half-cent sales tax that was voted on in 1996 to create and operate the two stadiums on the river and the improvements on the riverfront. The target was at the time to provide 30% of those revenues, of those annual sales tax revenues, as property tax relief for residential property owners. So the PTR is funded out of sales tax revenues, which are held in what we call the Riverfront Sales Tax Fund. So I just want to be clear with the verbiage and the wording that I'm using here. Just a bit more background. The financial model that the sales tax revenues support include various expenditures, and I've listed some of those here on this particular slide. So you have the primary, by far, expense element of the Riverfront Sales Tax Fund is debt service on the construction of the two stadia on the riverfront, and that, depending upon the year, is anywhere from $44 to a bit over $50 million annually. So we have the net operations of stadium and ballpark and the ballpark per the various lease agreements. That includes anything from utilities, insurance, salaries of staff, maintenance contracts, capital improvements, ultimately all the debt on the Hilltop acquisition. All of that comes out of this particular fund. The Cincinnati Public School pilot payment is also here. This is $10.9 million, roughly. It varies. That was a pilot payment, or a payment in lieu of taxes, that was negotiated back during the construction of the stadiums, essentially as compensation for the redirection of property taxes as the county was building two tax-exempt facilities on the riverfront. So I believe those dollars initially went to pay directly for some certificates of participation for essentially bonds for the capital program at Cincinnati Public Schools, and I think it's still being used for those capital purposes. So not long after the sales tax went into effect, the PTR began to be modified or adjusted from the 30% goal, as the sales tax revenues were not ultimately sufficient to support all of the commitments in the Riverfront Sales Tax Fund. So there was a point in time in the early 2000s where the fund reached a point where it was close to insolvency based upon some very lean years of sales tax growth. And just for a little bit of additional background on that, the initial growth estimates in the model were based upon sales tax growth estimates since the beginning of the sales tax, which think, I'm not sure if Mr. Brugan is in the room. Oh, he's over there. Goes back to the early 70s, I believe. And John, the sales tax growth from 70 to 90 or 96 was,
We were in the neighborhood of 7% annually from the early 70s through the mid-90s.
so the sales tax grew grew at a very robust rate from the 70s into the 90s. I believe the administration and board at the time believed they were making a relatively conservative assumption by backing that growth down to 3%. But from the time into the late 90s into the early 2000s, we probably saw growth rates that were more in the 1% to 2% range, John?
We've averaged about 2%. I think we're up to about 2.5, might be creeping near 3 now with some of the performance we've seen just in the last few years. But as a rule, until you start looking at the really strong year we had in the last couple, we've been averaging between 2 and 2.5.
Got it. So, bottom line, the weaker sales tax growth in the period after the sales tax went into effect ultimately created a situation where the fund could not support all of the obligations against it. So that's the point in time when the property tax rebate started to be modified. There were a lot of different actions that were taken to try to continue to support the sales tax model. Debt refinancing, I believe in the mid-2000s, saved about $4 million per year. For a period of time, casino revenues that the county received were being directed into the sales tax fund. So altogether, at a very high level, that probably in and of itself is probably $8 to $9 million a year when you consider the debt service refinancing and the casino revenues. So there was a lot of support provided to the sales tax fund to try to keep it solvent. Of note, I should point out that the voted half-cent sales tax that was put into place as a general fund resource of the county. So it was additional funds to support the general fund for the construction of 2 stadia and improvements on the riverfront. That is important because ultimately the obligations in the riverfront sales tax fund are ultimately general obligations of the county. So the county has never, though, really used that fund or looked at that fund in that way. We've treated it as a restricted fund. We have never utilized on an operating basis the funds in the riverfront sales tax fund for general fund purposes, nor have we taken the position that the general fund is there to backstop this fund. But legally, that's the way the fund exists, although we have taken every effort to make sure that we treat this as a restricted fund in practice. In terms of the PTR allocations over the past several years, as I get to the point of the presentation to define a clear recommendation, this shows you where we've been in the past. You can see that levels have varied over the years. We have 3 years since 2011 where we provided a full property tax rebate, one of those years being last year. We have, in years aside from that, been up and down, just depending upon the capacity of the Riverfront Sales Tax Fund. So for 2023, I'm recommending a property tax rebate of $8.42 million. That's about 9%. That's about a 9% rebate. Equates to about $28.96 per $100,000 home. Making this recommendation for several reasons. Number one, the potential for softness in the economy as we go into 2023. I wanted to make a recommendation that provided the maintenance of a prudent reserve level, given, number one, the value of the assets that we have on the riverfront. This really is the sole backstop, if you will, for those assets. So right now we have a reserve, a sales tax reserve, I believe that's in the 46 million range, something like that, against assets of close to $1 billion. on the riverfront. So I wanted to provide a recommendation that provided a prudent reserve for those assets. Also, as I mentioned on the previous slide, protection of the general fund if there were to be a series of down years, combined with anything that would necessitate an urgent or emergency repair of assets. Wanted to make sure that the general fund is protected. And also with the recognition that we have, that this board has decisions to make in the future on assets on the riverfront and as it relates to the two stadium. We have major capital decisions that will be forthcoming in the coming years, and to make sure that we were in a position to fulfill the board's goals in that regard. So I do want to say, just in full disclosure and transparency, that the board last year took an approach, and we've had different policy positions on this in the past. We've looked at maintaining a minimum PTR, trying to hit a full PTR every year. We've looked at trying to set a PTR where it was increasing every year. Last year, I think we heard a dynamic of looking at this in one-year increments, where we would look to see if we can fund a PTR in that given year, that we would do so. So in full disclosure to the board and in deference to the conversation last year, the balance that is in the reserve today supports a full PTR. That, you just do the math, that dollar value is there. However, to provide that would mean a significant draw on the reserve in a fund that, again, as I said, is the sole backstop for not only the assets on the riverfront, but serves as a firewall between those liabilities and the general fund, and the general fund, which would be obligated if that firewall did not exist. So the recommendation ultimately comes, again, out to a 28.96 per $100,000 home. In terms of moving forward, again, made this presentation today. Happy to answer any questions. I had intended to put this on again for a staff meeting presentation in a couple of weeks, so that we could address this issue again if the board so desires, before towards the end of the month, looking at a vote on the PTR. So, and again, just for history, for especially for individuals at home, but the way the Ohio Revised Code is written is the board needs to make an affirmative decision on this rebate every year, or else, according to the Revised Code, the rebate cannot be provided in the future. I can get the board the full ORC citation on that, but I think that has to do with the specific legislation that was put in place to give the county the ability to do this particular rebate. So with that, I'll close and open up for any questions, but first I want to defer to Assistant Administrator Brugan if there is anything additional that you wanted to add.
Nothing further.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. We have to let the auditor know by December the 1st what our decision is, and so I'm sure we will do that and not miss that opportunity. I just wanted to make a couple comments. Jeff, you said you're going to come back to us next week, or did you say 2 weeks?
Don't think we have a staff meeting scheduled next week, so the first time would be in 2 weeks, so I believe that would be on the 15th.
Okay.
So I'm happy to slate this again for a staff meeting presentation on the 15th. Meet with board offices individually to answer questions and provide information up until that point, but happy to meet again on the 15th to go through whatever data the board would like to hear about or hear more about in advance of a decision coming at one of the later meetings in November.
Thank you so much. I think the individual meetings will help to have us come to a conclusion by that timeline that we have. I'll just make a general comment. When we look at protection of the general fund, that's, I would say, number one for me, because as we as a board, we're able to get our people through this pandemic, and it's not, a lot of people think because of federal money that came in, but no, because how we utilized our money that was in our budget. Of course, the federal money helped, but I don't want anything to happen or something that we don't know about come about in this county, and we're not able to afford to be able to protect our people. So that protection of the general fund is certainly very important to me. We don't know what inflation and interest rates, where we're going to be, and so that's on the top of my list. But at this point, of course, not going to make a recommendation. I appreciate the information that was given. So, Vice President Reese.
Thank you for the presentation. And there's just a couple things that I wanted to make sure, because a lot of times when it gets to helping the people, we kind of we just had two different conversations. And we said, oh, that was a restricted fund and that wasn't that fun. But when it comes to big projects, we always figure out a way. We find a way. And this went on the ballot to the taxpayers. None of us were in office in terms of this office. And it was promoted, and this is the thing I'm trying to stop, is to have, when we put these levies or taxes on there, we tell the people one thing, and then after they pass it, they say, oh, no, you misunderstood, we didn't mean it. If we can keep our commitment to the Bengals, who was on the ballot, then why would we not keep the commitment to the taxpayers, the homeowners? I want to take a step back to say, and this is not to you, Mr. Ruge, so you don't have to sit here and stand there. If you want to have a seat, you can. But I wanted to put this out there. The reason that I'm for the 30% is that's what was told to the people. And just like in the Bengals lease, whatever is in their lease, and their lease was not on the ballot, by the way. That was not voted on. That lease was not voted on. It was voted on a half cent to build stadiums. We don't went beyond building stadiums with this half cent. We've done, you mentioned, Mr. Ludo, you mentioned Hilltop. That wasn't on the ballot, but that's $30 million. Garages was not on the ballot. They didn't say we're going to build garages on the banks, but we are building garages. We have built garages. I remember not too long ago, some months ago, we didn't get it, but we was willing to go with the World Cup, and that was going to be $40 million out of this fund. And we said, we got to do it for the World Cup, and they don't even live here. They don't live here at all. And we were willing to do it. We were jumping over to try to figure it out. How do we do it? And at the end, I think we had questioning for almost 45 minutes, and at the end, Mr. Liu came and said it'll be about $40 million, and I think we had $42 million. We was willing to do it for the World Cup, but we won't do it for the Hamilton County taxpayers. So that's why I go so hard about this 30%, is that if we can make it, when the Bengals come in, we say, oh man, we got to stop what we're doing. We got to figure it out. We got to make it work. We got to do what we're going to do. But when it comes to this, we give a scare tactic. Oh, we don't have the money, and we got to be prudent. And all of us have been prudent, I believe. We had a structurally balanced budget and gave people 30% last time. I believe that we should think about the homeowners first. I want to get a listing of how many people are at risk, not their names, but how many people are at risk for property taxes, at risk of losing their homes. How many people are foreclosed because they couldn't pay their property taxes. This is the time when we really do need to help the homeowner. We have jumped up and said we're for affordable housing. Not just new people getting a house. If we want to be affordable, we got to be affordable for the people that got the house right now. Hold on to that house, plus get new people. Not make it unaffordable for the person that lives there that got to get out. We also have a levy increase right now on the ballot. So we got to give the people back something, because their stuff is going to go up. So I believe that the full 30% is more needed now than when they passed it in the 90s, because people are trying to hold on to their homes. Inflation is going up on the people. They can't afford it. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of things that can help people. We got a few things that we have done as a county, but people are really, really struggling. So there are a lot of things that we paid with this half cent that was not on the ballot. And we're still paying for these things. And I believe that we should honor, if we're willing to do it for the World Cup, we got to be willing to do it for the people that live in Hamilton County. So I'm hoping that we can get the pen, sharpen the pen, like we did last time. I want to commend the administration. We came with a structurally balanced budget. I would commend the board. I think we made the right decision. But I think more than ever now, the homeowners need us. They need us now more than ever. And while I do appreciate sports, I'm a huge sports fan. but somebody keeping a house, that's life and death. So I think that's very, very important. Even the Reds, when they couldn't afford it, what did they do? They shortened their payroll on us. Lost 100 games. We lost money. We didn't have parking revenue like we would have if they would have, had a different type of season. But even they still gonna get. We just voted for them to get some speakers after losing 100 games. Now, if we can keep our commitment to our sports teams, which I think are very important, we should be able to keep our commitment to the homeowners of Hamilton County. And I think that's what we took into account last time. I'm not speaking for everybody, I'm speaking for me. And I think if we can't be about affordable housing, if we're going to not give the homeowner a break and make it unaffordable for them to keep the house they have. We have the money, as Mr. Aludo has indicated, the money is there. And if we don't use the money for this, it's gonna go to a whole lot of other stuff. We got seats in the stadium and padding in the stadium, speakers in the stadium, tailgating space, garages, all nice things. But I would hope that we could keep in mind also the homeowner, and I think we can do both. And so I'm going to just say that I support the 30%. I know we'll have more conversation, but people say, oh, I want to be fiscally responsible. Well, we fiscally responsible by giving the homeowner something back that's paying the taxes. It's fiscally irresponsible to me to fund something like a World Cup and then forget about the people that live here. So I think what we're trying to do is, of course, balance all these things. We've got some expenses coming up, but just to have the conversation, even though it's a different pot of money, but just to have the conversation a second ago, we're gonna expand Convention Center, we're gonna make green space where we don't make no money, we're gonna do all these things, and then the person sitting at home watching it, and they can barely pay their bills. They can barely pay their property taxes. They're looking at a foreclosure notice. So I think the good thing that we did last year, and I hope we can do this year, we had a balance. We had a balance of investing in the future, but also not forgetting the people that's been here their whole lives. And then lastly, I'll just say this about affordable housing that came to me. It's interesting that there are people right now they're about to foreclose on them. Banks are about to foreclose on them, or they're about to lose their house because of property taxes. And then we say, well, and those people might have been 20 years in their home, almost close to probably paying it off. But then we want to throw them out and then start over with new person come in, and they got to now take a 30-year loan. So my point is they never get to the ownership part. They're close to it, but because of the property taxes or they can't pay the mortgage, they get thrown out. They're closer to paying the 30-year mortgage off than the person that's starting. So for me, I just see it holistically, looking at affordable housing, and I think that this issue is a part of affordable housing. So just wanted to, Commissioner Driehaus and I just came from a home event with the Housing Opportunities Made Equal, so that's really heavily on my mind. So I know we'll have more discussion about it. That's where I am. I'm hoping that we can sharpen the pencil and get to that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Driehaus.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff and John, for the presentation. I am going to carefully study this, as I always do. I've been in a couple different places on this over the years. But I think it's very helpful from my perspective to see the charts where, John, you have given us different percentages of the PTR, and I would appreciate you doing this exercise again, where you've listed out a number of different options that we can consider, including the recommendation from the administration. What I would appreciate is we've been as low as 6, and we've been as high as 30. So can you give us the 6, put in the 9, which is the recommendation, and give us some graduated things to look at so that we have a clear understanding of what the real impact is here to the fund, to the general fund, and I don't mean the general fund, I mean the fund itself, the stadium fund, and then the impact to the homeowner so that we can really understand better what the impacts are to both. And I've got something, I have a whole folder on the PTR, John. So I dug this out from my folder. It's a memo from you from 2021, and I'll share it with you. But this chart makes it very clear as to what the different percentages do for the fund and for the homeowner. So I will appreciate you doing that exercise again and getting it over to us so we can take a look at that. I was going to mention something else that I've utilized in the past, just to kind of, the other one, and Jeff, you've kind of already done it. I think it's helpful for me to understand and be reminded of all the obligations of the fund. So it's the debt service, it's the pilot to the Cincinnati Public, all the things that you mentioned, and kind of make sure that we've got all that in front of us too, so we know what then is left for us to look at that's not obligated by debt service, for instance, things we have to do. We don't have that much flexibility with this fund. So I want to look at that as well and be reminded of what those obligations are, if any of it's changed, if any of the amounts have changed, so that this year we can have fresh eyes on fresh numbers. So if you could get that to me and get it to the entire board, I think it would be a helpful exercise. Thank you.
Madam President, if I could just briefly, because I don't think I said this in the course of the presentation, but I did just want to provide a little bit more detail on the nature of the recommendation that was provided. So you have the $8.45 million, I think that was the final number, PTR. The reason that we had landed on that number was trying to think through what would be a prudent reserve in the fund. And the number that we were ultimately shooting for was somewhere between 75% and 100% of the maximum annual debt service within the fund. So I just want the board to know that, number one, that may not be a silver bullet, may not be the only solution, but I wanted to let you know that it wasn't an arbitrary picking of a number. The number that we got into is 85. The reserve would remain around 85% of maximum annual debt service. And the tie of a reserve to maximum annual debt service is a traditional tool used in the finance industry to guarantee or to show reserves and to show adequate reserves, et cetera. So again, not that it's the only methodology here, and not that it should ultimately drive board policy, but just in terms of the administration's recommendation, I just wanted you to understand that there was some method to the mechanism here, that it wasn't just a random arbitrary number that we'd thrown out. But again, happy to answer questions over the course of the next couple weeks and meet individually with board offices, like as Commissioner Driehaus said, to run through scenarios and let you know how different alternatives would pan out.
Great, thank you. And I remember that chart, and also it had on there a projection of depletion, like where we would get to our lowest number. That would also be great to have included. Were you getting ready to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask. Also, you said last time I was too late to look at it, but hopefully we're not too late this time. So Warren County Commissioners announced property tax holiday, and you said they had a different formula. I want to look at that, because even the leadership in Cincinnati, some of them live in Warren County, and they said, oh, I'm in Warren County because the taxes is low, but their leader in Cincinnati bringing us proposals that we got to use tax money for. So I'd like to look at, how did Warren County able to do a holiday tax, and is that something we can look at? I also want to put on the table the children's levy that has $100 million. I understand it's not going to be able to be used. I want to see, is that opportunities? I'm looking at everything that can give the taxpayer a break. What I don't want is because we kind of got a gloom, this is kind of gloomy. Oh my God, we're going to run out of money and this and that. And then a day later, oh, we've got to, I had a call from the Gensler folks. We want to present this $500 million to $1 billion of what we can do, and we can have all this. And to the taxpayer, they're like, hold on, yesterday you're broke, but today you're rich. Which one is it? So could you please look if there's other things? Maybe it's Warren County. I'd like to know more about that. Is that something that we're maybe able to do? And what they basically did is didn't collect a portion. They gave a holiday. The Warren County Commissioners decided county will not collect their portion of taxes on property owners in the county. Maybe that's not it, but I would like to, I think, I know myself, I can't speak for everybody else, but it'd be good to know all of these other potential options to give the homeowner a break. I know that's my goal, is how do I give the homeowner a break when they're getting killed at every other, they're getting killed when they go to the grocery store, killed at the gas place, killed everywhere, the gas, electric. How can they get a break? So that's all I have, Madam
And
President.
Madam President, just one quick item on that, and just to the entire board, I do not mean to be gloom and doom in this conversation. I promise you that.
Do your job. You gotta do
No,
your job.
I promise you, I come at this from the perspective of trying to put the board and the county in a position that we do not have to go through gloom and doom. We were there in 2006, 7, 8, 9, when we were considering bankruptcy in this fund, until we studied it and realized that bankruptcy in this fund would ultimately implicate the general fund as well. So trying to make sure this board and the county today never has to live through that. So things right now are not gloom and doom. Just want to tell the public that we're not gloom and doom here, but trying to put in place things that protect us against that. But happy to work with the board on ultimately a decision that works for everybody here, so.
Thank you for that. And I'm just saying, there are other things commitments that we're doing. There's other commitments. We're building garages, we're doing tailgate space. We're keeping the commitment on that side, no matter what it is. And I'm saying, how do we keep that commitment with the taxpayers as well? So that was all my point. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there something going on with the green? Is this a special day or that I didn't know about? Oh, okay, okay. Okay,
told today that this was my Halloween attire.
That's right, that's a day late.
okay, all right. Okay, with nothing further coming before the board, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Commissioner Summer Dumas.
Yes.
Commissioner Reese.
Yes.
Commissioner Dreehouse.
Yes.
Thank you.